Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Elections Now video. Today we're going to be taking a look at what the 2020 election would have looked like if COVID-19 had not happened. But before we proceed with the video, it's important to note that these are my best estimates and guesses for what would have actually happened. Obviously, it's impossible to tell what would have happened, but it's important to sort of guess and provide our best estimates for what would have changed. But what do I think would have changed? Not too much, but there are a couple key differences that I would have looked at. So firstly, I want to talk about Donald Trump's approval rating, or more of his disapproval rating. So if you didn't know, Donald Trump has been a disapproved of president. The only time where his approval rating was higher than his disapproval rating was in the first couple days of his presidency. Since then, he's averaged about in the mid 50s range. Compared to his approval rating in the low 40s. And so it's important to note that during election time, if we find November, around this time, Donald Trump actually had one of his sort of higher approval ratings and lower disapproval ratings. He had comparatively, compared to the first sort of year or two of his presidency, a 44.5% approval rating to a 52.7% approval rating, a disapproval rating for President Trump wasn't bad. He actually was relatively high on election day. However, obviously after the Capitol insurrection, obviously that went drastically different, and now President Trump's most recent poll taken of his approval rating is close to 60% to about 38%, for obvious reasons regarding the Capitol insurrection. But what does this mean? Is that Donald Trump was a disapproved of president before COVID even happened. But what would have changed if COVID didn't happen? So let's go to the electoral map and find out. So COVID-19 was actually a major factor for a lot of undecided voters when they were deciding for who to vote for in the 2020 election. A lot of people alike, Republicans and Democrats, didn't like Trump's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. There was largely a lack of a true nationwide leadership. There was a lot of a disavowal of scientific claims set out by doctors and professionals, and a lot of people didn't like that. A lot of people were actually deterred by Donald Trump's handling of the pandemic because all science sort of went otherwise, and this sort of disavowal, and I guess continued disavowal of true scientific claims of doctors and medical professionals is what deterred a lot of people, frankly, from Donald Trump. Even though he said that he was all right with the masks, there was no true national leadership. There was no true national organization for COVID-19 to be centered around. A lot of states and a lot of nationwide policies were very open. They were very the regulations were minimal, and there was no true national consensus on what people should do regarding COVID-19. And a lot of states had different responses, frankly, to the COVID-19 pandemic. But without COVID, Trump actually is pretty popular. He has a lot of stuff to play on, and frankly, the Democrats don't have too much to play on, right? A major factor of why Joe Biden won the election is because of Trump's handling of COVID-19. Democrats played on that very well, and that's a reason why Joe Biden won the election. But if COVID-19 hadn't happened, Trump would have been able to play on the economy. That was a major selling point for Trump. His tax cuts and other economic policies were things that were actually favored by a lot of voters. A lot of people turned out for Donald Trump because of his economic policies, because they actually liked the America First policy. They liked Trump's specific priorities. They liked his priority on bringing jobs back, of deterring corporations from outsourcing cheap labor and other assorted things. They actually liked Trump's economic policies, and that was something that Trump would have played on. He tried to play on it a little bit within the debates and just overall through this election cycle, but it didn't have the same magnitude or impact it would have had if COVID-19 had not been the limelight, if it had not been if it had not been the thing on the hotspot, if it had not been one of the major priorities within this election cycle. And it's likely that Trump actually would have won, and I'm going to outline that on this presidential election map. So obviously both candidates still win the safe states that they both would have won in the 2020 election. So Trump, under this scenario without COVID, would have overperformed his 2020 numbers. So obviously he would retain all the states that he kept. So the Democratic safe states are Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, and then for the Republicans, Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, minus the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, and then for the Democrats, Northeast, D.C., Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and then Maine. And then South Carolina for the Republicans, Colorado, New Mexico for the Democrats, Alaska and Hawaii for their specific parties, Illinois, and Minnesota. All right. And Virginia. All right. So these are the safe states that both candidates would win in this election. Now, where I think that this changes is that Trump obviously keeps every state that he won in his 2020 election. So Trump wins Iowa, Trump wins Ohio, and Trump wins Florida and North Carolina. So that already puts Trump at 231 and puts Biden, probably Biden in this case, and puts Biden at 232. So Trump wins all of those states because he overperforms in this election. And Trump expands on the economy a lot more, and so his base expands. A lot more people are inclined to vote President Trump because a lot of those boisterous comments, all of those came from COVID-19. All of them came from the disavowal of science. A lot of that, a lot of those crazy claims that you thought were a signature of President Trump, those all came from COVID-19, and so none of that would have happened. Yes, Trump would be unpopular because of a couple other reasons, maybe the social injustice movement that happened last summer. So there's a lot of reasons why Trump would have been not as popular as he would have liked. However, Trump still keeps those states. He still keeps his hold on Florida, he still keeps his hold on Iowa, and he still keeps his hold on Ohio. So this is where the election becomes a little bit different. So Trump still keeps the 2nd District of Maine. That's a district he won in 2020. But another district that he gets, and this is something that he won in 2016 but not in 2020, he actually wins the 2nd District of Nebraska. I think that Trump wins the 2nd District of Nebraska because we have to remember that this is overperforming Trump. This might be 2016 level Trump. The real question of this election is, can Democrats overperform? Does Trump's overperformance account for the number of people that are just going to vote Democrat no matter what? I do think so, and that's a reason why I think the 2nd District of Nebraska actually goes for the Republican Party. The next state I'm going to be taking a look at is the state of Arizona. Now, I think the state of Arizona still goes to the Democratic Party. I think that it still goes to the Democratic Party. A part of this is because, as I've said in previous videos, people and citizens from Arizona, they respect the regional leadership. I think that leadership amongst Arizona, specifically late Senator John McCain's wife, would still endorse Joe Biden, regardless of whether there was a COVID-19 pandemic or not, right? I think that she still endorses President Joe Biden because Donald Trump still has some factors that are unfavorable, that are unlikable, that a lot of the citizens of Arizona agree with. And so they still vote Democrat. I think that most people that voted Democrat in 2020, in the actual 2020 election, would stay that way even under these different circumstances. Because even though Trump would play on the economy pretty well, I think that those voters care more about their statewide representatives, their statewide leaders, frankly, than President Trump. I just think that a lot more people from Arizona just think that way. I think that that endorsement still goes to President Biden, thus the state goes to President Biden. Now let's get into the Rust Belt. So for the Rust Belt, I actually think that Trump wins Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Now he's pretty close to 270, which is what he needs to win the presidency. But I don't think that he wins the state of Michigan. So Wisconsin and Pennsylvania were relatively close. Wisconsin went by 0.7%, Pennsylvania went by 1.2%. If we go to the presidential election map, you can verify those numbers, right? So Pennsylvania went by 1.2%, Wisconsin went by about 0.7%. And so it's important to know that those margins are really close. When we look at the number of people that voted, Wisconsin only went for President Biden by 20,000 votes, and Pennsylvania went for President Biden by about 80,000 votes. And so those are margins that Trump can overcome, especially since there's no COVID-19 pandemic. A lot more voters are voting for Trump based purely on the economy, because regardless of whether it was true or not, Trump will still say that he had a very strong economy, one of the strongest ever, before COVID-19 happened. And so that is where he plays in this election. So the next state is the state of Georgia. Or actually, so the reason that I characterize Michigan for the Democratic Party is because, frankly, 3% is something that Trump might not be able to overcome. While Trump does better than he did in the actual 2020 election, he isn't able to overcome a 3% deficit. That's a lot of, that is quite a lot of people. Michigan had about 150,000 voters that went for Joe Biden. I think that is unlikely. Whoops. Come on, please. Okay. I think that it's unlikely that Trump is able to overcome that deficit. And frankly, 150,000 votes is a lot of votes. The next and final state on the map is the state of Georgia. I think that Trump wins the state of Georgia. I think Trump wins the election here. Why do I think that? Because Georgia was only separated by 12,000 votes. That's very little. And this state was actually the closest in the whole election, decided by close to 0.2%. I think that there are at least 12,000 people in the state of Georgia that would have just purely voted for President Trump based on the fact that his economy was strong. And his economy would have remained strong. And that's a major selling point where Trump would have played in this different scenario. Although even if Trump was able to get 12,000 votes, it would still be an incredibly close state, and the Republican Party would still probably have a reason to be alarmed at how close Georgia was getting. But I think that Georgia would still go to the Republican Party because there are at least 12,000 voters in that state that would have voted for President Trump if COVID-19 hadn't happened. Also, it's important to note that if COVID-19 hadn't happened, it isn't just an expansion of President Trump's performance, but it also declines President Biden's performance. Less people are more inclined to come out and vote if Donald Trump doesn't have a COVID-19 pandemic. If he doesn't mishandle COVID, then a lot more people are less likely to vote for President Biden. And so not only does Trump expand, but Biden declines. Biden's turnout declines, which is something that hurts the Democratic Party, which is a reason why Trump wins this election. Thank you all for watching. I hope this was informative, and goodbye.